Morning.
No.
I met with an Episcopalian priest this morning who looks a lot more like a rabbi than I do. I walk in, he's got a big black yarmulke and a beard.
Really?
I thought I was in a yeshiva.
Am I in the right place, you know?
Maybe he started out as a yeshiva boy and just,
Good bit.
There was another one like that who came in last year in response to something I'd sent, and he was raised as Jewish.
Uh-huh.
And then, through a variety of circumstances, he became Christian, and then he decided to become a Methodist minister.
Did the yarmulke stay glued on?
The guy that had the Jewish background did not have a yarmulke, but this guy did, and a big black.
Why did he have a yarmulke?
I
He
didn't.
was talking to you?
We only had an hour. No, I think he wears it all the time.
Oh,
I mean, he also had one of those robes with the little white thing in front. So,
there's a name for it, you
He
know.
was covering all bases. He wanted to make sure he got to heaven by one way or another.
covering his all his bases. Let us go ahead and start with the blessing, then Rabbi, you can do your thing. Together, or Ruth.
Adonai.
Eloheinu melech haolam.
Asher Kishano b'mitzvah Torah, B'tzivano, so divrei Torah.
Blessed
Blessed
are
are
you,
You Adonai our God, ruler of the world, who has sanctified us with your commandments and commanded us to engage the words of Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay, now it's all yours, Rabbi.
okay. I believe we are on page 124, and this is Parshat Tazria Mitzorah, and it's Perek Bet, the sin of slandering others. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so obviously Tazria Mitzorah is two parshas that are combined. So as you know, you have 54 parshas, 52 weeks. 2 weeks have to have double parshas, and this is a very usual one to combine because they're short and they have some thematic overlaps. So that's why we're doing it. We're in the book of Leviticus, which, as you know, tends to be rather technical, especially the first part. But there are some important ethical and moral issues here, and this is one of them, about slandering others. And I have been amazed. One of the things I've learned over my years as a rabbi is how easy it is to slander others. I am just shocked. I have been in situations where people start saying something about someone that is just obviously wrong, and most people believe it without checking it out, without confirming the validity of what they're being told. They just believe it. So it's, I don't know if it speaks to the gullibility of people or to their desire to believe bad things or what. But if I start a rumor about somebody that's obvious, that's most likely not true, you're gonna, within a short time, have a lot of people running around, and some people, 1/3 will say it's definitely true. 1/3 will say it might be true. 1/3 will say maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But the acceptance rate of things is very bad. Now you can slander somebody even if it is true, right? So if somebody went to prison years ago for something, well, I have a friend from high school. I had a friend in high school, or an acquaintance in high school. His father went to prison for, some sort of white collar crime, which I sympathized with. He didn't want to pay so much money to an uncle of his. And why should he? But the uncle didn't like it. It was Uncle Sam, so he had some sway, and he served, I guess. Thank you, Rick. You hear Rick? He's laughing, right? Ha ha.
Your support system.
1 out of 12.
Lonely support system.
1 out of 12 likes my sense of humor, at least that, and in terms
Well,
of.
and this is a good time to have it, because it is the 19th, so our taxes should have all been paid by now.
Yes, don't mention that.
Except if your accountant is slow.
Bernie?
My rabbi in New Jersey used to say there are no coincidences.
Huh.
And in the news this week, I don't think I need to refresh anybody on what's going on with Fox. And this Torah portion came up at the same time.
And
Really, by Sean Hannity?
and they accused Fox and they convicted Fox of doing it knowing the truth, right?
Right.
So but if you publish a false report accidentally, that's not good either, right? So anyway, I had a friend, an acquaintance in high school, and his father went to prison briefly, I guess, for some sort of white collar crime. So there's one thing to just mention that as a fact, everybody knows that, but it's another thing to bring it up in a context in which it's designed to slander the other person. So context is important as well. So those are just a few of my opening comments on this. I'll open it up for some brief and directed thoughts, and then we'll start on the text. Bernie, did you want to, so the press doing this sort of slandering is worse, or it's worse than a person doing it because they spread it much wider? Evelyn.
I was thinking of the first part that we are supposed to go over, where the earlier rabbis equated a skin disease with a moral sin, and they're equating what is a physical disability with something that is attributable to a person's behavior. Today, we know that one has no relationship to the other, but in those days, if you broke out in a skin lesion, you obviously had to have some sort of moral deficiency. And when you stop and think that cleanliness in those days was not what it is today, and that maintaining good skin condition was really next to impossible, it's no wonder they broke out in lesions or had different kinds of rashes. And so it seems to me that they must have thought that the entire population was sinful in one way or another. And today I look at it and say, it's ridiculous. You look at it and say, okay, those people at that time felt that way because of their lack of information. Today we look at it and say, it ain't so. And so that aspect of the Parsha reading left me feeling irritated, to say the least, and especially the commentary and what was it? Nahama Leibowitz's comment on page 125. At that point, she says that equating a skin disease with a moral deficiency is not correct, shall we say.
Evelyn, are you happier with the Scarlet Letter concept?
With the what concept?
Scarlet Letter. The Scarlet Letter, remember the book, The Scarlet Letter?
Yes, what about it? I don't know.
That was a different approach. Rather than saying skin disease indicates sin, if you find somebody with some serious sin, you put a scarlet letter on their clothes.
That was a different story.
And yeah, that involved adultery, not skin lesions as such. So I don't see the relationship between
Well,
the
what
two.
I'm saying is that instead of using a skin disease to indicate sin, you would takes somebody who sinned and mark them, you know, mark them in some way. The society would mark them rather than, you know, just using marks that come from nature to indicate sin. All right. Anyone else, comments to, yes, Bernie?
For the record, my friend, Mr. Google, says that slander, it has to be false to be slander.
All right.
So you're saying that spreading a rumor is only bad if it's not true?
Spreading a rumor is bad no matter what, but saying something
Yeah.
bad about somebody is only slander if it's not
Okay.
true.
So I guess there needs to be another word, but if I were to talk about this friend's father, and let's say he wanted to join the synagogue board, and I emphasize his conviction for white collar crime 25 years ago as a way to, you know, to disqualify him ethically from serving on the board now, that we need a different word rather than slander, but it's still not, you know, using something that's maybe true, but it's not a legitimate reason, you know, is still bad. And it's maybe so Bernie, can you come up with the right word? If it's
How
not
about bad mouthing?
bad mouthing, so bad mouthing is when it's true, slander's when it's false. But bad mouthing, what if it's a good bad mouthing? Let's say somebody wants to run for president and you know a lot of information about them that really disqualifies them, and you say all this bad stuff about them. Isn't that bad mouthing, or is bad mouthing only when it's out inappropriate context? You see the category I'm trying to create. Babette.
Well, you have to believe in redemption too. If the guy went to jail and he paid the price to society, is he redeemed? Could he serve on the board?
Right, so that's the question, is if something is relevant to their the current or future functioning, then you should bring it up, and there's nothing wrong with bringing it up. If it's not relevant, even if it's true, and you're bringing it up maliciously just to harm their reputation unjustifiably, but that's in the eyes of the beholder, right? I mean, some people could say that, you know, any presidential candidate, whatever they did when they were in high school is relevant. Other people would say, you're just dredging that up to pour mud on that person. And it's, you know, the fact that they, I don't know, stole a candy bar in 4th grade, you know, has no possible relevance to their functioning as president in 2 years' time.
Well, if you're a plagiarist and it sounds familiar.
Or you're Bill Clinton.
Well, but Bill Clinton, for example, you know, he got involved in sexual improprieties in the Oval Office with a direct subordinate. And then they brought up things he had done with Arkansas state employees earlier, directly relevant to what is a criminal activity. But they didn't start talking about how, I don't know, he threw spitballs at somebody he didn't like in 5th grade, right? That would have been, in my view, bad, you know, irrelevant and done solely for the purpose of maligning a person who, you know, without any, you know, appropriate context. Marcia.
Yeah, okay. I see the politics, I think, we got to set that one aside. But when you're talking about someone on a more personal level and you say things about them, especially behind their back, things that you wouldn't want to say to them to their face, that's where the real harm is done, where people are spreading rumors about someone, then you're harming them, and with something that's not true. Usually it's something that's not true. you know, and I think that's where the slander part comes in, or whatever word you want to use for it. It's the untruth told behind someone's back about someone.
All right, so if I don't think Pam is really qualified to be president of the United States because 20 years ago, she stole $14 million from her company.
That should come out when she's vetted. That should come out in her public history.
But should I go to her and I say, Pam, I don't think you are qualified to be president because you're.
Yeah, if you went to her.
Ethical lapse, you stole $14 million. You've never expressed regret. You've never returned the money. And I'm going to go and tell the TV this, but at least to warn her in advance, is that important?
Yes.
And then she could say, it's not true, I can prove it, and you give her at least 10 minutes to prove it.
Right.
Then that is, and she said,
Pam, we know you didn't do that.
$14 million is in a Swiss bank account, but I think we could do with 13 million, and I could make a new bank account for you for 1 million. And I'll say,
As long as you don't take a cut of the,
I just wish my life was that exciting.
But yeah, at least at that point, you're confronting her with it, you know, if just to talk behind someone's back and, you know, and not even, and then they hear what you've said after the fact, that's really nasty.
Okay, that's so there's the issue of slander, and there's the issue of bad mouthing, and the issue of talking behind someone's back is a third issue, even if it's true and relevant.
Well,
Okay, Evelyn.
there's an instance where perhaps some comment was made, and in the through the grapevine became so distorted. There was an incident many years ago when I had come down with just a bad cold, and I received a phone call from a friend, and I told her what the story was. And the next thing I knew, she had told it to someone else and to someone else. And through the telephone grapevine, I got a call from someone who said to me, I hear you are dying, you are terminal, that you have a dreaded disease. And of course, I'm shocked and I'm wondering, what the heck happened here? It turns out that through various variations of passing information from one to the other, the distortions became increasingly ridiculous. And so I think sometimes this can happen also when a truth is started off and then the next thing you know, it gets distorted, whether it's the press or personal. I'm thinking more in terms of personal slander rather than the national news per
I'm
se.
sorry, I can't hear you. There's too much noise. Steve, can you mute people or?
West Camino del Sol, Suite 200.
He has a radio.
Optional while in our facility.
Is it Cy?
I think so.
It was mine.
Okay, so now it's okay. Thank you, Si. Okay, Evelyn, sorry.
I said what I was going to say, so that's about it. Other than things can get distorted with good intentions, and the next thing you know, there is untruths being circulated.
Okay, let's Marcia, and then we'll start.
Sometimes they're very hurtful too. So when things get distorted around, and especially if they're not true, and it can be very hurtful, and that's the bad side.
And it might matter if it's intentional or not, but either way, it can be very bad. But of course, if it's intentional, it's probably worse, but not always. Okay, page 124.
Rabbi, before we go to begin, Reva, did you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, just a quick comment. And one is, I think we're talking about two kind of overlapping metrics. The first one is, as Bernie described it, bad mouthing, and we've used various ways of saying that, where the focus is on the person intentionally harming the reputation of the second person. So the focus is on the intent of harming how other people view somebody else. And it may be true or it may not be true. So, and then the other piece of that is if it's true or not. So, you know, is the person, is the unflattering comments true or are they not true? And with bad mouthing, it could be either way. So I think we have sort of two overlapping issues, one around truth and one around the intention of the speaker.
Mhm.
And it's compounded when we mentioned behind another person's back. It sort of really stresses the part of the intention of the speaker.
Okay, thank you, Riva. Who'd like to read?
Okay, I'll read.
Okay, thank you, Evelyn. Page 124, left-hand column.
Perek Bet, the sin of slandering others. As we have already noted, the Torah and its interpreters present neither a medical diagnosis nor treatment for the skin disorders of their times. While ancient priests examined infections on the body or fungi in the home, they did not prescribe any medicine or therapy for healing. They did determine a period of quarantine, which may have been unrelated to the fear of passing the infection from one person to another. Instead, the isolation of the infected person seems to grow out of a concern for guarding the community against people who were, quote unquote, unclean or impure because of some wrongdoing. It is for that reason that the offering brought by a person who has been cured of a skin disease or whose home has been infected is called a sin offering. The rituals of the offering in the sanctuary are meant to celebrate purification, the end of being considered unclean. All such wrongdoings that cause infections are forgiven through the sacrifices and offerings brought to the priest in the sanctuary. Many commentators ask, what was the wrongdoing or the sin that brought on such serious infections and prompted the emergency procedure of quarantine? In answering that question, interpreters focus attention upon the record of major biblical personalities who are said to have been afflicted with tsarat or skin disease.
Okay, thank you, Evelyn. You can stop there just for a minute. So there's two ways of looking at this. We could look at it historically and try to understand what was going on in the biblical period, or we could look at it spiritually. What could this mean for us today? How can we reinterpret the material here in a way that's useful for us? Obviously, the two are going to be quite different because they, as Evelyn pointed out very bluntly at the beginning, the whole premise of this is not something that most of us could or would accept. So that causes a pretty big problem. All right, so we've gotten to the question of what is the wrongdoing that brought on this infection? And so let's just take some comments about that. I mean, obviously, we don't believe today that dermatological problems indicate that there's some sort of wrongdoing behind it. Okay, Pam.
Rabbi, when did the Jewish people change this attitude that if you're sick, it must be because you did something wrong? When did?
Well, modern times, in the last 200, 250, 300 years. I mean, remember, there's no germ theory, right? So they don't know about bacteria or viruses. They don't know about the need for sterilization. You know, nobody knew about that. And
it's fairly frequently then that they've changed this to so like in medieval times, they were still saying, well, you must have done something wrong if you're sick.
correct. And so, so this, it's only in the last 250 years or so that all of modern Judaism developed. And so, this is maybe, shocking to realize how recent all this is. But, and that's why there's such a disconnect between so many in Israel and so many here, because many of the Israelis went straight from the pre-modern societies to Israel. So if they were in Yemen or wherever, they didn't necessarily go through this modernization process where they were exposed to the Enlightenment, to the Emancipation, where they understood modern concepts of everything, including of a religion. So that's why they support some of these parties that are so, medieval.
Yeah.
Way. Okay, B, Marcia, Evelyn, in that order.
Well, it wasn't just the Jewish thing, because during the Black Plague, priests or holy men would walk through villages with whips, beating themselves, because they were saying we did something bad, that's why we have the plague. So it was, I can't say universal because I don't know about other religions, but with Christianity, it was the same.
Yes, absolutely. So, this was, the whole world, nobody knew about any of these things and about science. So therefore they tried to use religion to explain medical things, and that's not usually a successful approach. So what B is saying is very important, and just the attitude of the Inquisition, that the priests in the Inquisition would torture these people, for reasons that today would be ludicrous, so yes. Marcia and then Evelyn.
So what do the Orthodox, there's different ultra Orthodox and the various ones. What is the stance nowadays in our country with the Orthodox as to these skin rashes, causations, etc.?
I don't know. I'm trying to get my Orthodox friend to come on this. Soon.
Do you think that he would believe something like this? I mean, have they modernized enough so that they don't think that if you broke out? I mean, my mother used to say if you say something and you sneezed, she said, "Oh, good, it's the truth." There's so many, folk stories around so much, that's still being carried around.
Yeah, superstitions.
Yeah, superstition, right?
Yeah.
It was folk thing. Yeah.
I mean, in medieval times, they the Jews would put a chamsa or various symbols above a baby's crib to keep away Lilith, so Lilith wouldn't kill the child.
Red string.
So they didn't understand they never heard of sudden, what is the
Sudden death syndrome.
sudden death syndrome, where the sudden infant death syndrome, where the baby just dies. To them, some evil spirit came in the night and killed it.
Yeah, and then what have we done to make this happen, kind of thing, and blaming it on some
right, and Christians accused the Jews of blood libel, of killing a Christian child to use blood in matzahs. I mean, it's not a medical thing exactly, but I mean, there were a lot of beliefs that today we just can't even understand how anyone could believe in. Bernie.
I disagree a little bit. I think that still exists today. You hear these far out preachers saying that COVID is caused because we're such bad people, and more things like that.
Yes, I'm not saying they don't, but these are pre-modern thinkers. So these are people who either some have not been exposed to Enlightenment ideas, or they've been influenced by them. There was one guy I used to hear on the radio, preacher, and he would quote all these famous philosophers, and he would act like he was very cosmopolitan, but he had these extremely primitive beliefs. So he was just pretending to be influenced by them to show that he was sophisticated, but really he didn't benefit from modern thinking. The reason modern thinking is good is because it is persuasive, not because we just like these people like Kant or Hegel or whoever. And so, okay, I think Evelyn.
Yes,
Can I finish?
Marcia touched on what I was going to say too, is apropos of the Orthodox today. Do they believe as these people did 2,000-3,000 years ago, or are they more open-minded and will accept modern medicine and take their children to be treated and have vaccines, or do they deny all of this? And I don't know.
I think it depends on the particular group, but Israel has a problem with polio because a lot of the ultra-Orthodox aren't getting their kids polio vaccines. So clearly in Israel, there are a lot of Orthodox who are extremely primitive. And then there's a lot of Orthodox who are not. So it's hard to say in general. And in America, there was this whole movement, anti-vax movement.
Yeah.
Now, and everybody would say that follow the science, or we believe in the science, and they would then, say the science does not prove the vaccine is useful, or whatever. And then others would say, well, it's useful, but it shouldn't be given to this group or that group because of, so where does science end and where does polemics begin? It's not always clear, especially with something like a vaccine that's just been developed. There's not that much.
Maybe in the state of Florida is where it happens.
Well, there is something to that. I mean, whenever there's a story in the news about something very weird happening, and it's in Florida, then the comments are filled with, well, of course, it's in Florida. You expect that to happen. Riva.
Yeah, I thought we should muddy the waters some more and bring up the mikvah. Is that related to women being so-called clean and unclean and pure or unpure? And it seems to me that might have been expurgated from this section because these books were geared to younger children.
Yeah, they don't want to get into anything too
Naughty.
right.
Sexual.
Right.
Sometimes the reason that in Israel that they didn't want the that they didn't want to take the shots, whether they were their children or the adults, was that you can't tell me what to do, and that was real prevalent across the country.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Now there is, of course, the expert on all of this is an anthropologist called Mary Douglas, and she's done a lot of work on the meaning of these purity rules in Leviticus, and her books are not easy to understand, but she sees it as a certain symbolic system. And we could, if we wanted to, we could study some of her writings and try to understand it. So there are scholars that have certainly delved into it. The question of how much of the mikveh is connected to that, I think Riva raised that question. That's one of reasons that classical Reform Judaism eliminated mikveh. Eliminated anything that was seen as superstitious or pre-modern or not based on, enlightenment is based on rationality. Everything should be rational. Judaism is a rational religion. But we've gone away from that in the last 30, 40 years because we've learned that not that many of the customers, quote unquote, meaning you guys, don't want a rational religion. So for me, a rational religion is great. You know, we can study all day and, you know, argue back and forth what's the truth. And then whatever we decide is the truth, we do. And anything else is just, what's the word, Bernie, Baba Mises or Narishkeit. See, I know more Yiddish than you think. Give me credit for it. So you could do that, but we found that people like many of these things that are emotionally appealing, even if they're not quote unquote rational. Sai.
We just got finished with half the country thinking that if you wore a mask against COVID, it was good, and the other half thinking it was not good. And this is in 2022. And my feeling is that even then, going back hundreds and hundreds of years, there was a lot of politics in decision-making for the people. People on the right felt a particular way, people on the left felt another way. And so there was always this banging of different ideas. And obviously, some people on the right would win one time and others on the left would win another time. But that didn't really have too much to do with medicine or basic religion. It was how the guys in charge felt at particular points in time.
And remember that this book of Leviticus is almost entirely written by the priests, and it wasn't voted on by any board of any synagogue or by the whole Jewish people. It was written by the priests, and they used their influence to get it as one of the primary texts. So it's just politics. So, but this doesn't represent a compromise between different groups. It's what the priests think. And there was other groups that didn't necessarily agree with a lot of this stuff or most of the stuff, but they're not represented in this text. So Sai is 100% correct, but what can you do about that? Marcia.
Just questioning this little section about the skin rashes, etc., being caused by having told slanderous things about someone. You would have thought even back then they were doing poultices and taking aloe bushes or whatever and using them on skin rashes and stuff like that. And it's sort of like the priests who wrote these stories out, etc., were kind of blind to that in some way in this specific case with the skin rash thing. Okay, I would think that that was something that was medicated in some way, but you know, with whatever they knew about natural medicines, you know. I don't understand why this came up in there. It's sort of like, it's like in the wrong place, you know. It's sort of when something isn't right, you know, the inclusion of it, you know.
Yeah.
What do you mean in the wrong place?
I mean, it doesn't seem appropriate that it was included in Leviticus because it doesn't seem really accurate.
Well, Marcia, I think leprosy was one of the worst scourges in ancient times. And they realized that by isolating the individual, there was less chance of it being spread as such, which is why eventually they isolated those who had leprosy in their own colonies. And I think any skin lesion in those days, the first thing that must have come to their mind was the beginnings of leprosy. And that was why they quarantined these people.
Well, I could understand that, but why come up with this, oh, you broke out in this leprositic or whatever the word is, some rash of one sort or another because you sold slander about somebody else. I mean, it's a crazy attribution to do that, you know? Doesn't even make sense. You know, you walk past a bush in the, you know, in the desert and you're going to get some sort of a contact allergy, you know, if you're, you know, some people will. I mean,
Bye, Babette.
Bye,
Bye, bye, bye.
bye, bye, bye.
Pam and then B.
Unmute. Rabbi, can we talk about the next part? Rashi, your guy?
No, Rashi's not my guy.
Maimonides is his guy.
Oh, I'm sorry, Maimonides is your guy. Okay. Can we talk about the next part? Because I think that's very interesting about what
Okay.
about Moses.
Okay. Evelyn, you want to read that, the next,
About Rashi.
yeah, the next,
Okay. Rashi, for example, points out that Moses suffered from a serious skin disease after he complained to God that the people of Israel would not listen to him. Because he implied that the people refused to follow God's commandments, Moses was punished. The Torah says that his hand became infected, white as snow. Earlier rabbinic tradition.
Stop there for a second. So, we could look this up. The way, there's a lot of books with Rashi, on the side of the Torah, and it tells you where it's a comment on Exodus chapter 4, 1-6. So the comment on this does not come from this week's Parsha, but it would be easy to find the original comment, which could be which is many versions are translated in English. So you could find the original source if you wanted to. Okay, so what do you think about this, Pam?
Well, I mean, it's just so unfair to Moses. No, the poor guy has done so much. And, well, and things go, well, this must be your fault, Moses. You know.
Well, so he's basically indirectly saying to God, the people that I'm leading are not being cooperative.
So he gets a skin rash?
Yeah, and therefore he has to have a skin rash.
But this was true, right? That there's no question from reading the Torah that the people many of the people are resistant to following the commandments.
Right.
In fact, they build an idol at a very critical point. Okay, so it's true. All right, let's get some more comments. Rick, Riva, Sai. Did I miss?
Yeah, I was just, I was looking at Exodus 4, and in that, it's when God is trying to convince him to go deliver the people of Israel, and he's hawing around, and so God is showing him power. He puts his hand in his robe, and pulls out, it's leprous. He puts it back in, and it comes out, it's clean. Where's the other one? Because I hadn't remembered seeing where he had leprosy. I know Miriam got leprosy because her and Aaron tried to usurp authority.
That's quoted in the next paragraph, actually.
Exodus chapter 4.
Then Numbers is Miriam. The next
Yeah,
paragraph.
those are, I mean, I haven't found any other, don't remember any other place where Moses got leprosy. And again, God was just showing him, hey, I'm God, I control this. And you can count on me. I've got the power. Because he was calling Moses to a pretty big job.
Chapter 4 from the beginning. Moses responded and said, but they will not believe me, and they will not heed my voice, for they will say, God did not appear to you. And God said to Moses, what is that in your hand? And Moses said, a staff. And God said, cast it on the ground. And Moses cast it on the ground, and it became a rattlesnake. And I went hiking with Michael Zager Sunday, and we saw a rattlesnake. Moses fled from the rattlesnake because he heard that, at least in Arizona, rattlesnakes can cause you quite a bit of damage. God said to Moses, stretch out your hand and grasp its tails. He stretched out his hand and he grasped it tightly, and it became a staff in his palm, so that they shall believe that God, the God of their forefathers, appeared to you, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And God further said to them, bring your hand to your bosom. And he brought his hand to his bosom. Then he drew it, and behold, his hand was leprous like snow. And he said, return your hand to your bosom, and he returned the hand to his bosom. Then he removed it from his bosom, and behold, it reverted to be like his flesh. Okay, and then, yeah, and then, so, in verse 6, yeah, so I have it here only in the Hebrew, and of course, the Rashi is written in a different script, which is called Rashi script, which Rashi never used. It was introduced hundreds of years later when they first started printing the Torah with commentaries. In the when did the printing press start?
Gutenberg. but,
16
Was it 14 something?
1645, something like that.
Anybody know the exact date? But
Gutenberg Bible.
the earliest, so anyway, they wanted to differentiate the Rashi's commentary from the Torah itself so people would know which was which. So they made a new, but anyway, it says Mitzorat b'sheleg, that his hand was leprous as snow. Derech sarat liot levana, and the way of leprosy is to be white. Okay, so Rashi's just Rashi mostly tries to explain just the basic meaning, and so he's trying to explain why does it say white. 1439. Okay, so so anyway, Rashi's just saying that that when it's
1436 on the printing press.
okay. When it says in the Torah that his hand was white as snow, that means it was leprous, because leprosy made your skin turn white. That's what Rashi's saying. So God is just playing a game to show Moses that he has power. So I don't know that Moses was punished. It was just his hand turned leprous for 2 minutes and then turned unleprous. So I don't know. Who was next?
Yeah, that was it. That was the only reason I brought that up, is I don't know of any other, and that wasn't a punishment on Moses.
That's right.
That was just a illustration for Moses.
Yeah, so that's the problem with Harvey Fields here, is that he's not always right. And this is an example where, I mean, it's there, but he shouldn't. I don't, there must be a commentary that Harvey is basing it on where it says that this is somehow punishment, but I don't see it. I agree with Rick. Thank you, Rick. Who was next?
Sai had his hand up.
Sai or Riva, then Sai, then B.
Yeah, two quick comments. One is with leprosy, particularly fingers, toes, noses do turn white, and then if the disease progresses, they often lose those parts. You see leprous people with missing fingers, toes, noses. Second thing is that another common cause of rashes is sexually transmitted diseases. So there might be been, in their thinking that if people sexually misbehaved, they would be found out because they have these rashes, because rashes are quite common with the more common sexually transmitted diseases.
Uh-oh, that's a reason to behave properly and be careful.
I don't know where adolescents with acne fit into all of this.
Well, that's
certainly
obviously they're doing something sexually improper. So that's interesting. And acne, which almost all teenagers get acne. If you see that as a sign of doing something wrong, that's going to create a lot of guilt in a lot of teenagers. Well, okay, Sai and then B.
I wanted to ask you, Rabbi, what do you think the time frame was between Rashi making this remark and it actually occurring with Moses? What are we talking about? 1,000 years?
Well, let's say that the Moses, if he lived, would have been in the 13th century BCE. So then that to go from there, but the text was probably written very roughly about 600 BCE. So you're interested when the text was written or when Moses would have lived? But let's say from where the text was written, so 600 BCE, Rashi lived about 1100 CE, so it's about 1700 years.
Now, that's a big time frame, and maybe Rashi was slandering Moses.
What?
Rabbi, you just said Moses if he lived.
Yes, you pointed that out before, Marcia. I'm not.
I don't remember it before.
I'm not going to let Marcia get me disbarred from the Rabbinical Association. I'm
Okay.
sorry, Marcia. No further comments on those sorts of questions. But B.
This isn't related to exactly what we're talking about. This is what I've been thinking. If we're so rational today and we don't blame our misdoings and God is punishing us, why do we say Gesundheit?
Oh, what does Gesundheit mean?
God bless you.
It means to your health. Means to
What?
your health.
Good
And
health.
people
Good-
believe that when you sneezed, your essence, your spirit left through your
Yes.
nose. And so in order to protect you, they said to your good health, so that the spirit would come back possibly.
Very rational today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very rational.
Carries
So
down
we-
over the years.
So a lot of things that we say are not done are done. My father blamed himself for my sister dying. It was because he didn't keep the Sabbath well enough.
Oh.
And it was horrible. So this is 60 some odd years ago, but I don't think much changes, a child dies. So there are a lot of things that we say we don't do, we actually do. And so you can't say that we're totally rational today. I don't believe that.
Well, there are people who are totally rational, let's say it that way.
You are, but what about the rest of us?
No, the world is in Gunson Meshuggah, as they say.
And a lot of that stuff is custom, God bless you, and, to your health and l'chaim and whatever the nationality is and saying.
Okay, I got the whole Rashi in English from Sefaria. If you haven't heard me talk about Sefaria yet, it's a very good resource. SEFARIA.org, and it's got Rashi in English. So Mitzorat Keshelek, leprous as snow. This is Rashi. It is the nature of leprosy to be white, which is the part I said. And thus we read in reference to a leper in Leviticus chapter 13, verse 4, if the bright spot be white in the skin of his flesh. By this sign too, he indicated that he had made a slanderous statement when Moses said, but behold, they will not believe me. Therefore, God smote him with leprosy, even as Miriam was so smitten for the slander she had spoken. So basically, Rashi here, Rick, is saying that he's comparing the leprosy. The Torah, in the Torah, it just says God makes the hand, Moses' hand leprous, and then God makes the hand not leprous. And it just looks like a trick to show his power. But Rashi says that that is not true, that Moses was making a slanderous statement when he said this, that they will not believe me, and that is why God gave him this. So that's in Rashi. So Harvey Fields is correct by saying that because he implied that in Harvey Fields's book, because he implied that the people refused to follow God's commandments, Moses was punished. This is not a fact, though. This is from Rashi, and this is not in the Torah itself. So, okay, Cy and then Rick.
If I said that that was a pretty woke statement. Would anybody know what I was talking about? No, of course not. Well, it's the same thing. They're making statements that I really don't understand, that somebody from, as far as I'm concerned, pulled out of the air, but has no background. So it's like the kids use it. It's a woke statement, whatever that means, and I have no idea what that means.
The problem is that in medieval Judaism, Rashi is considered authoritative. So what Rashi says is generally considered to be.
But why is he an authority?
Well, because
on this.
he was accepted as an authority. So the rabbis at the time and for hundreds of years afterwards basically said what Rashi writes is the authoritative interpretation. Now,
But he's not your authority. Your authority is Maimonides.
well, not really. Yeah. Not really. I mean, how could Maimonides be my authority? I mean, he lived 800 years ago. There, we would hope that there's been so many intellectual advances that, I'd like to believe if Maimonides was around today, that, he would agree with me. But we don't know that, of course. But the problem is that how Rashi interprets the Torah is considered authoritative, basically. And so to say that we're just going to ignore Rashi's comment is not easy to do. But Sai, you can do it. And as you point out, it's coming almost 2,000 years after the actual text was written. Presumably Rashi was summarizing the consensus view of tradition, but I don't know. Was Rick and then Marcia.
Yeah, one I say I always try and, in fact, I wish I could read Hebrew because I would like to actually read the text in the original language. But what was that website that you had said?
Safari.
And I always go back to what's it because when I hear people give an interpretation, I always have a reaction of like, are they the experts or is that just their opinion? But what's that website that you had?
Sepharia, Sefaria.
Like Sephardic, only not.
.org. And they've got all the Jewish sources in Hebrew, English, pretty much everything that you would ever think of wanting to look at and a lot more.
Thank you.
And it's formatted very nicely and they have just a huge amount of material. You may want to see if there's something on there that we could use as our study material. It's for sure there. The question is where and what, but definitely a good source, a very good source. Okay, who was next was Marcia, and then if B wants to say anything, and if not, maybe Bernie or Evelyn or Riva or Shirley or Donna.
I don't like this parsha only because we are being diverted by ancient beliefs of medical, reasoning, etc., away from the business about slander and how bad that is. And I think that we should be discussing that more in a modern context. And I think if we even go to Pinchas Pelly, who was down at the bottom of 125 and I'm moving on to the next page, we have more, it's not about skin rashes and things like that. It's about the hurtfulness that you cause by spreading rumors about people, inadvertently or not, So that's why I don't like this particular parsha. Okay.
I agree.
It's off topic for the years that we are living in, the year we're living in, that we should
And then the second approach I mentioned at the beginning is to ignore the details of the parsha completely and just focus on the theme and say,
that's how I feel. Okay.
how would we, and Riva kind of put a taxonomy of how these issues should be presented. There's 2 issues and there's 2 sub-issues, and then just ignore all the stuff about leprosy.
Right.
And then we could have a dermatologist come in and talk to us about skin diseases and how to take care of your skin, and keep that separate from how to not say nasty things about people.
Right.
Or dogs. Lily said, don't
say bad
nasty
about her.
things
We would
about her
never.
either. She said that would be very hurtful for her. Rick.
Yeah, I think kind of going back to what Marcia was saying, I don't remember who I first heard it from, but it's the story of trying to fill up a jar with rocks and sand and water. And the bottom line is you put the big rocks in first, and then the smaller gravel, and then the sand, and then you can put the water in, and it can contain it all. So you deal with the big things first. And so I do think slander is something that is really a major issue for us today. Leprosy, not so much, but one of the things that I actually not too long ago started memorizing Psalms 15, and I didn't remember it all, so I brought the sheet back out to go over it, and it really addresses this. Now, I read a lot of different translations because I don't read the original language. I can look it up, but it's not the same. And so I'll just read the first 3 sentences or verses. Who may worship in your sanctuary, Lord? Who may enter your presence on your holy hill? That's important, Desire. Those who lead blameless lives and do what is right, speaking the truth from sincere hearts. Those who refuse to gossip or harm their neighbors or speak evil of their friends. And I think that, as we were talking before, I think that balance of speaking evil or gossip, harming your neighbor, is balanced with the previous verse that says, speaking the truth from sincere hearts. So sincere is you don't have a grudge. You're not trying to cause problems. You want the truth out. So I think those 2 verses there in particular really show that balance. And again, it's the first verse shows that, hey, that's what God wants. He wants people that are like that. If you're going to come up in his presence on his holy hill, that's the kind of people that he wants. And then the last verse, and I'll just skip the one, but the last verse, and again, this is New Living Translation, so your verses, if you're looking at another Bibles, will be different. But it says, the final sentence is, such people will stand firm forever. So it gives a list of things to do. But I think speaking that truth and not slandering are kind of 2 sides of the same coin.
So how does that relate to the issue before us of God getting, according to Rashi, God getting angry at Moses for just implying that the Israelites were not being cooperative, which was completely true, Rick, right?
Well, again, that would be his interpretation.
That would be Rashi.
When I read the verse, I'm seeing that he's having his doubts. I mean, God's calling him to a huge task, and he's feeling inadequate. And so God is really showing him, again, if somebody wants to say, well, that's a judgment by God, they can say that because it's used in other areas. But I just don't see that in my reading of it. It doesn't look like a judgment. It looks like a reinforcing. Let me show you my power. So it just comes down to what you want to believe, what you choose to believe, I guess.
So we have 2 or 3 of you already who are questioning Rashi. This is shocking. Truly shocking. Who else was questioning Rashi? I forget, was it Pam? All right. And,
I have a question about the word gossip and what it means and its significance, because there's always gossip. Someone will always talk about, can you hear me?
Where do you see the word gossip?
No, when Rick was mentioning gossip as along with other attributes that we should not we should not partake in as such. And to me, there's a fine line. What is gossip if you are talking about a mutual friend that and says, oh, this mutual friend is having difficulty with something, whatever it happens to be, either financial or emotional, whatever. And people and their friends want to be supportive of them. Now, that would be considered gossip, and yet it's not harmful gossip. However, if someone deliberately takes that information and attributes an undesirable trait to that individual, would that be then considered slander? To me, there's a fine line there between gossiping, just telling people about each other, or actually creating an unnecessary problem. And to me, it seems that there's a fine line there.
Well, just for clarification, that's again the New Living Translation. So I just opened up to see what the Hebrew word is, and it's if I pronounce it right, regal, and it's interpreted as backbiting with the tongue. So
the Hebrew word,
it means kind of the same thing, but
where does the Hebrew word come from? Is this in our text?
That's the Hebrew word.
Say it again.
Regal.
Regal. And
R-A-G-A-L.
And
it's from
Strong's.
Strong's.
It appears in the book of Leviticus.
No, that's the verse that I was speaking of, that she's questioning about the word gossip, was Psalms 15.
Oh, Psalms. Okay.
Psalms 15. And that was verse 3 in Psalms 15.
Okay.
So that's in a different translation, it's backbite.
In modern Hebrew, the word is rechilut, but I do not believe that that's a biblical word. So use it, we're right to question, if we're looking at this as Torah study, then where a concept of gossip comes in the Torah is the only question that we're concerned with right now, right here. And so Rick is quoting from Psalms, which is not Torah, but is part of the Hebrew scriptures. And we could check there what the word appears to mean there, but I'm not familiar with regal.
Well, what's the Leviticus? What's the verse in Leviticus that mentions that?
Well, we're not. It doesn't say anything about gossip there. We're talking about the hand is left loose. It's chapter 4, verse 6 in Leviticus. There's nothing about gossip, and Rashi's comment doesn't accuse Moses of gossip. He accuses him of saying something, questioning whether the Israelites will observe the commandments when they, when Moses didn't think they were doing that, and he implied that, and God got mad. I wouldn't call that gossip. That's whatever that is not exactly gossip. All right, who'd like to talk? Anyone else? I'd sigh.
I think we're really beating a dead horse. We have so many means of communication. We're able to talk to the other side of the world. If I make a comment that I don't like the Chinese premier, am I slandering him? If someone says something about something else, are they being slandered? And we have the ability to do this. We have information on an ongoing basis, 24 hours a day. We make opinions and we retort on the opinions we make. I don't think that's slander. I think if you're going to get personal within a family situation, then you're talking maybe slander, but not overall. Not overall. It's impossible. It's impossible.
Okay. I like Sai's approach. It's very practical. Riva.
Yeah, one thing I find very problematic with this whole area is the underlying assumption that if you behave badly in some way, God will punish you. And what happens with a belief like that is you run into the situation B mentioned. And that is there's a tragedy, somebody in the family dies. And it's so enormously common where people, no matter what the circumstances were, feel guilt and feel blamed. And I find that whole issue so challenging.
What do you do in such a situation?
I don't know what we as individuals do. Particularly, I would say that it's so common to feel guilty when we've had one of these losses, and that, you know, you might say something like, I thought you were a wonderful parent, or I thought you did a terrific job, or I think you were not to be blamed for that loss. You know, that whole book about why bad things happen to good people deals with that same issue. That how do we deal with the losses in our lives under any circumstances? I don't have any simple answers.
Rabbi Harold Kushner, who wrote that book, deviated from traditional theology, right? So in traditional Judaism, God is all powerful and is therefore the source of all good and all evil.
Right.
Kushner says, no, God is just a benevolent God. And then there's this forces around us that God has no control over. Disease and war, and people make choices. So it seems reasonable to many of us, but and reassuring perhaps, but it's not traditional Judaism. So
I think that's a larger, tough issue.
And I'm not sure he really says, he was a conservative rabbi. You could say that he's presenting what is, I don't know, maybe not. Do you think people, when they read that book, think he's representing traditional Judaism, or not necessarily?
I think people who are not close to Judaism can't tell the difference between one version of Judaism and another.
Right. So they'll think that what he's saying is the Jewish view, when it's not. It's clearly not. But he's solving a problem. If God is good, how can so many bad things happen to innocent people? And the answer is that God isn't doing it, and that at least is something. Because if you believe that God is all powerful and all knowing, then why would God let children die? Why would God do a lot of things that we see around? Why would God let the Russians blow up all these Ukrainians for no reason?
Yeah.
So there's no, now the other way to answer that is to just say, many things are beyond our knowledge. Okay, but back to our topic here. Let's continue reading about Miriam. Evelyn, would you keep going?
Yep. Earlier rabbinic tradition argues that Miriam, the sister of Moses and Aaron, was stricken with a skin disease because she slandered her brothers by gossiping about their relationships with their wives. They are busy leading the people and making no time to spend at home, the rabbi accuses her of saying. They also point out that she embarrassed Moses publicly by questioning his marriage to a Cushite woman and by implying that she was as important a prophet as he was. For her gossip, slander, and public accusations, say the rabbis, Miriam was punished with a serious skin infection.
Now, she clearly did not know her place.
Thanks a lot.
But in those days, right, there was a certain role given to women, and she was implying that she was as important a prophet as Moses was. So basically she's saying, I want equal opportunities. And that in today's world would be a minimum, right? I mean, you're going to say a woman, just because she's a woman, she doesn't get equal opportunity. That would be horrible. But in those days, that's the way it was. And the fact that she's given some role of some prominence at all is is regarded as remarkable. So, and her comment there, busy leading the people who make no time to spend at home, is true. These were workaholics and their wives and children were sitting at home alone. So that's true. And she's saying, you're neglecting your families. Your kids will grow up thinking they're orphans. That seems a reasonable thing to say. And it's their sister. So what's wrong with this? Seems to be an example. It's not gossip. It's true and it's important. And she's saying, I'm telling you this, and I'm telling everybody this because it has to be fixed. And she probably went public with it because they didn't listen to her privately. So she says, if I tell all the Israelites, they'll pressure Moses and Aaron they'll say, go home already. It was the only, so I think everything she's accused of here is probably true. And there are very good reasons why she did those things. Okay, Pam and then Cy.
She's his older sister, correct?
Yeah,
Yes, right?
Yeah.
That's part of the reason why she is trying to let him know from her, maybe her wisdom or being older, what he should do better.
So what's wrong with that? Nothing.
She should have not said it publicly, I think.
And remember, Moses was detached from the family for a long time. So she's trying to correct, perhaps, things that maybe Moses' parents would have been expected to teach him, but Moses wasn't at home because he was living at the Pharaoh's palace, which worked out good in the end, but Moses may not realize certain things that he should realize. Cy.
Rabbi, I want to ask you, in Reform Judaism, as time goes on and as the Bible gets written by various people, do you find that certain situations, if you will, are changing in how they're written? For example, is there a tendency to get away from racism? Is there a tendency to get away from the thought of slavery? Things of that nature that were very basic in the Bible, but the modern man has changed his thinking, and has that been represented in the newer writings of the Bible?
Well, I think that the two cases you give are different. So slavery, yes. Slavery and capital punishment are two issues that were everywhere in the Bible. And then Jewish tradition, starting from the rabbis, move away from them as much as possible. So even in the Bible, they're already starting that process in terms of slavery. So slavery, there's a long process to minimize it. Capital punishment, there's a long process to minimize it. Racism, there's not too much racism in the Bible. I mean, Moses marries an Ethiopian woman who's clearly Black. His sister apparently criticizes it, but it's not exactly clear whether she's an outsider or that she's Black, which is the problem. It doesn't say. So there's not a lot of racism in there. So there wasn't a lot of racism to get rid of, at least not overt racism. There is one part, I believe, in the Noah, which was used before the Civil War by ministers to support racism, but that's an interpretation based on one word or one interpretation. So, but yes, in many areas, over the course of 2,000 or 3,000 years, there's a move toward more modern thinking. That's what you're supposed to do, even in Orthodoxy. And of course, as Reform Jews, we try to do that more so. But of course, the problem I see in the modern Reform movement the Religious Action Center, I looked at some of their statements, and they take positions that don't, they take positions based on their political views, and then they make a half-hearted effort to justify it with Jewish sources. So I looked at, in one of my books, at environmentalism. So they made a number of statements strongly supporting different parts of environmentalism, which I think everybody supports. But when I looked at the actual statements, the arguments from Judaic sources was very weak. Clearly, they decided they want to be pro-environmental, and then they didn't really make much of an effort to justify it in a rational way from Jewish tradition. They felt, well, every Reformed Jew and most other people will support this. We don't, and that's not the way you're supposed to make decisions. So I'm concerned with that. But yes, there's tremendous progress in all areas, as there should be. Bernie.
I've always assumed that the people in the Bible were not white. How about the people who wrote the Torah?
Well, the ancient Israelites, I don't know, they were
brown.
I don't know. The Yemenite Jews are like brown. Were they like that? I don't know.
Well, I mean, look at the people who live in the Middle East today. Why should the Jews have looked any different than that?
What difference would that make?
Only that obviously today's portrayal of the people in the Bible is not that way. Watch the Ten Commandments. Even Zipporah was white in the movie. But everybody says Jesus was white, and et cetera, et cetera. But I'm wondering how the people who wrote the Torah viewed this, and what did they look like?
I can't tell you. I don't, but I guess they were a little darker than we are, but they weren't black, but I don't know. Rick?
Yeah, I think, I mean, that's one of the things you could focus on this, because he, they did talk about his wife. But when I look at it, in fact, this was part of my reading for today. So I thought it was interesting because I was thinking about it earlier. To me, it's more of a power struggle. Here's Miriam and Aaron both are coming up and they're saying, hey, has the Lord only talked to you? He's talked to us too. And they wanted in on the authority. And then chewing on that afterwards, it's like, okay, Miriam got the leprosy as kind of a punishment. Aaron didn't, but then Aaron is the high priest. If he would have gotten leprosy, it would have just disrupted everything. So God had, in essence, mercy on him. Miriam kind of had to pay the price, but they were both. I don't think it was as much about the color of Moses' wife or the fact that she wasn't she was born in another tribe. It was just that they wanted to have authority, and God had put Moses in the supreme authority. You're responsible, and so it was kind of in essence, a small rebellion. And so that's why I think God corrected, and that's why he only corrected Miriam and not Aaron.
Makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah.
You're shaking your head, Rabbi. Is that
Miriam is treated in an unnecessarily harsh way for making appropriate critiques of her family. What is she supposed to do? Ignore the fact that the poor wives and children are sitting home alone? It's her obligation to try to fix things. There's people involved. So I think Miriam needs to be apologized to. But
do you really think that Miriam should be discussing this with the nation?
I think she had to, because I think she told the brothers privately and they ignored her. So the only, you know, that these brothers are spending their time with the nation, right? That's, and if everybody knows they're neglecting their families, they can say, okay, we can adjourn here. Moses and Aaron, go home and spend a little time with your kids. No, but if the people of Israel don't know, then they don't have any, I think it was necessary. In the next paragraph, we don't have to read that. But it mentions the Hebrew word used in the Talmud for what Harvey Fields calls slander, lies, or misinformation, and that in Hebrew is lashon hara. So the Chafetz Chaim wrote a book in the 19th century, I believe, on all the laws of lashon hara, and he basically says you shouldn't say anything about anyone at any time. Which is just, I read a little of it and I thought this is ridiculous. But I think we all accept that there's some rules about what to say and what not to say and when to say it. And it's not a simple set of rules. It's about context, and you can divide them like Riva did into certain categories. And this is important. Sometimes it's not what you say, but what you don't say. If you say somebody's bad, but let's not talk about it because that would be lashon hara, that may be a backhanded way to make an insult as well. That's not good. So it's not only what you say, but if you say stuff, and as Evelyn said earlier, when you say, you know, somebody's sick, you may have to think, well, could that get easily exaggerated by the person I'm telling it to? And before you know it, you know, she's dying of 14 terminal illnesses simultaneously. So you have to try to think about consequences. But on the other hand, in contrast to the Chafetz Chaim, I think that there are many cases where you have to say certain things about certain people for certain reasons. So I think motive becomes important in many cases. Steve, I'm turning it back to you. If you wanted to make a final comment, you have time, and if not, you can help us wrap up.
I thought what we could do is do the final blessing first, and then I'll make my comments or announcements. So let's begin with the final blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'hayeh olam nafal betehenu Baruch atah Adonai Noten HaTorah. Blessed is Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who has given us the teaching of truth, implanted within us eternal life. Blessed is Adonai, giver of the Torah. Amen. Okay, a couple of things I want to mention. First of all, the can-do item of the month is canned meat. So I looked at the box yesterday and it's almost empty. So we need the donations for that.
And it can be canned fish as well.
Canned fish, yes, sir. The other item, a couple things, is new membership bot and pizza party, which is free to all members, is May 5th. It starts at 5:30. We ask that you bring a dessert so that we can have enough for the oneg. We anticipate a large attendance for this event, so please come and enjoy pizza. Of course, it's going to be cheese or veggie, and bring a dessert.
And Steve, the Helene was complaining that the Brotherhood hasn't given her the information or the folder file or something for this event.
Okay, John Green was supposed to do that, but I'll check on that. Then also on May the 7th at 10:30 is the Mother's Day brunch sponsored by the Brotherhood. It's going to be an elaborate brunch. We're definitely gonna have lox and bagels and cream cheese and all the other good stuff, plus a couple of egg dishes. Call the office if you want to attend, and it's $18.
What date was that again?
The
The
7th,
7th,
of May.
the week before Mother's Day.
Yes, it's the week before Mother's Day. And that's all I got.
Just if I can add something, I've got a coffee with the rabbi today at 1:30, which is filled, but then we have another one coming up on Monday, the 24th. And so far it's K. Grossman and B. Eisenberg,
Mhm.
and that's at 11:30 on April 24th. And then there's also one on April 27th at 10 o'clock, which our own Rick Ray is one of the people planning to come. That also has some space. So if you'd like to have coffee with me and a few other people, just let me know.
That's all I got. Thank you all very much. It's quite interesting.
Just watch your skin, and if you have any signs of redness or pimples, go to your local Kohen, which is me, and I'll diagnose it and cure you.
If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all.
Exactly. All right, everyone, have a great afternoon, and we'll see you all soon. Take care.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.